The plain uncle's boarding with some woman looks like a disaster waiting to happen. He really shouldn't go on that flight. Little Emily's sudden outburst caught both my husband and me off guard, prompting a surprised "ha" from both of us. Especially me, I was doubly shocked. A plane ride with another woman? I thought it was just a business trip. Why does he need to fly with a woman? The reason quickly became clear, unforgivable. To think he'd betray me and plan a romantic getaway, despite the warnings of better not get on that plane. Despite everything, John, my husband, still went off to the airport, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and start my own revenge drama. I'm Susan Harris, a 30-something housewife, living with John, my husband. Though we both work, our house is often empty. Weekends are usually spent chilling at home, but lately, John's behavior has been odd. He's been coming home much later than usual, even on weekends, citing work as the reason. The frequency of his business trips, leaving the house deserted for days, has spiked. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find John's behavior suspicious, but I haven't found concrete proof. Plus, I was afraid to confront him and rock the boat. So, like every other day, I choose to ignore John's selfish actions, somehow keeping our marriage intact. Then one day, a little visitor came to our house. It was Emily, my brother and his wife's daughter. To me, she's my niece. My brother and his wife live close by, and we often dine together and go shopping, interacting in various ways. I've watched over Emily since she was a baby, and I often visit my brother's house to play with her. So Emily has grown quite fond of me. On a day when my brother and his wife absolutely couldn't die having the day off, agreed to have Emily over and look after her for the day. "Auntie, let's play. Emily wants to play with dolls," she said with a smile as bright as a blooming flower. As soon as she saw me begging to play, I was completely smitten with Emily. "Okay, please take good care of her today," my brother said. "Count on me. I'll call if anything comes up." When I said that, my brother smiled as if relieved. Then I brought Emily home, and we spent a fulfilling day playing with dolls and baking cookies with the ingredients I had prepared. In the midst of this, I heard the door open. "Keep it down, will you? It's my day off and you woke me up," grumbled John as he came out of his room. He didn't seem to notice Emily was there and glared at me before letting out a big sigh. Generally, if you know your husband is resting at home, wouldn't you try to keep it down and let him rest peacefully? Can't you even be considerate of such trivial things? You're really failing as a wife, he snapped. "I'm sorry for the noise, but I did tell you beforehand that Emily was coming over today, didn't I? I even mentioned it might get a bit loud." "Don't give me that excuse," John shouted back when I tried to reason with him. Surprised by his loud voice, I realized Emily, who was baking with me, looked like she was about to cry, so I quickly focused on getting John out of there. Even as John hurled terrible words at me, all I could say was, "I'm sorry." I didn't want to provoke John any further and scare Emily. Eventually, John seemed satisfied and said, "I'm going to wash my face," disappearing into the washroom. Relieved, I turned to Emily and apologized, and she bravely shook her head, saying, "It's okay." "Uncle looks like he's going to fall," Emily suddenly said after John went to the washroom. Again, I asked, and she nodded. Emily has always said strange things, almost like she can see into the future, especially about people she's close to or sees often. At first, I thought it was just a child's play and responded casually with, "Is that so?" However, after experiencing several instances where things happened exactly as Emily had said, I came to accept that this child must indeed be seeing something extraordinary. So without doubting her words, I just nodded and carried on. A few minutes later, I heard a loud noise from the washroom followed by John's angry voice. Ouch. Once again, it happened just as Emily said it would. John came back from the washroom, his face red, and started hurling more terrible words at me. "You could have at least cleaned the bathroom properly. Because of you, I slipped and fell." Even though I knew I wasn't the type to neglect cleaning and that the bathroom was always spotless, John's claim was clearly due to his own carelessness. It was unbearable how he was pinning it on me. "I always keep it clean. Don't blame me for your own carelessness, okay? Don't talk back to me. It's your fault, so apologize properly." His words were so unreasonable that I was utterly astounded. Despite it all being his own doing, he was pushing the blame on me, making me apologize just to vent his frustrations. I sighed at John, who was like a small child, unable to even control his own emotions. At the beginning of our marriage, John wasn't this selfish. He was rather a person who seemed to care about others. But as time went by, John began to show his true colors. He really didn't seem to care about anyone else at all. Just 1 month into our marriage, I found myself living as John's maid. I basically couldn't talk back to John, and even if I was made to do something I didn't want to, I couldn't complain. That was the rule imposed on me. If asked whether I wasn't angry about it, honestly, I doubt I could nod in agreement. However, I dreaded making waves in our marriage and complicating our life together even more. About a week had passed since the day Emily came to our house when news of John's next business trip came in. This was his 3rd trip this month, and this time he was not going to be back for about a week. On the day he was to leave, as I was helping him pack, my phone rang. Who could it be? It was from my brother's phone. Thinking something might be wrong, I excused myself from John and answered the call, only to find Emily on the line. She probably borrowed my brother's phone. Emily sounded panicked on the other end. I told her to calm down and listen to what she had to say, and then she dropped a bombshell. "Uncle's plane, the one with the lady on it, it's going to catch fire. He really shouldn't get on that plane." I was shocked for 2 reasons. Emily's words about the plane catching fire and the fact that John was boarding a plane with a woman despite being on a business trip. It was unthinkable for him to be on a plane with a woman on a business trip. What on earth was going on? It was getting me nowhere just thinking about it, so I told John that Emily had called and said, if possible, it's best not to get on the plane. But John brushed it off. "I ain't got no obligation to play along with a kid's game. Today's trip is set. No way I'm not going." And he left the house. He would surely head straight to the airport. Emily's predictions had never been wrong before. It's likely not going to be any different this time, and John will probably meet a terrible fate. As his wife, I probably should tell him to turn back immediately, but more than that, I was concerned about why he was getting on a plane with another woman. I couldn't help but feel like I needed to uncover the reason behind why such a situation had occurred. So I decided not to stop John forcibly and just watch how things would unfold, so I could be ready to start my own vengeance if need be. Sometime later, while I was relaxing at home, the word "breaking news" flashed on the television that I had left on. Curious, I saw that a plane that had just left Japan had crashed. I had a bad feeling, and upon checking, sure enough, it was the plane John was on. The TV showed images of the plane on fire, perhaps ignited by gasoline. Was this what Emily was talking about? Just as I was starting to make sense of it all, I received a call from the rescue team. John had been rushed to the hospital and was in a touch-and-go situation. They also asked about a woman who was with John, apparently in her 20s and worked nights, who had unfortunately died immediately after the accident. The rescue worker had tried to contact her relatives but couldn't reach anyone, and as a last resort asked me. Regrettably, I had no information about her and had to confess as much. After thanking me for my cooperation, the rescue worker hung up. Life-saving efforts were likely still ongoing. I couldn't help but feel sorry for those involved in the accident. John ended up in the ICU because his condition was critical. Visits were restricted until he stabilized, even for family members. Instead of getting upset, I found myself focused on other things I needed to do, so it actually worked out for me. I made sure to inform both of our families about John's accident. My in-laws were particularly shocked, and hearing my mother-in-law cry over the phone truly saddened me. But my thirst for revenge is far from satisfied. I won't rest until I've put him through so much agony that he regrets holding on to life. I could never forgive John for treating me like nothing more than a maid while he gallivanted about and engaged in affairs. A few days later, I got a call from the hospital. Apparently, John had regained consciousness. His condition was gradually improving, and soon he was moved to a general ward. So I steeled myself to visit him. When I mentioned John's name at the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and said, "Ah, the one from that accident." I've been frequently checking the news, and it seems that the crash was one of the worst in history, with many lives lost. Among them, I sensed an extraordinary will to live in John, who had miraculously survived. Led by the nurse to his room, I found John asleep, connected to many IV drips. The nurse told me that he was working hard at physical therapy every day, and after it ends, he'd sleep like a log. Since John's doctor was free at the moment, we decided to talk while John was asleep, and I got a detailed explanation about his condition. The doctor said that John suffered severe burns all over his body in the accident, and the impact of the crash also damaged his spine, causing him to lose sensation in his lower body. No matter what treatments are tried, the sensation in his lower body will likely never return. He can no longer walk or even stand, let alone go to the bathroom by himself. Of course, from now on, he'll be forced to live in a wheelchair, and he's currently undergoing rehab to learn how to manage daily life on his own. When John learned that he would never regain sensation in his lower body, he looked utterly hopeless about the future ahead. I had never seen John seriously commit to anything, whether it was his work, relationships, or with me. Hearing that John was diligently doing his rehab, I wondered if there had been some mistake. But John has a high pride, and he probably couldn't accept a life dependent on others, not from me. From now on, he's going to have to live with disabilities, and no matter how hard he tries, he won't have any choice but to rely on others. Yet, despite understanding that, he stubbornly refuses to depend on me, which almost made me smirk. The doctor provided me with materials on how to renovate the house for wheelchair access or move to a barrier-free home, and how to better deal with John's disabilities in the future. The more I read the materials, the more I realized the gravity of John's condition, and I suddenly felt a bit sorry for him. But this predicament is the result of his own doing. If only he had listened to Emily's words and canceled that affair trip, all of this could have been avoided. It wasn't even work-related. He should have prioritized his own life. That would have probably saved the life of his affair partner as well. Due to John's poor judgment, one life was lost, and now he has to live bearing a heavy burden. I've truly realized how important it is to trust and accept others' words. I've always trusted Emily and her advice, and I'm so glad I did. I'm thinking of sending Emily a thank you message later. When John groaned and woke up, "Susan, is that you? Susan, you came." Seeing me, John looked relieved and continued to speak. "I've been lonely since you haven't visited for a while. Thanks for coming. I can't offer you anything, but make yourself at home." This was a completely different attitude from the John who used to belittle me and treat me like a maid. I wondered if the accident caused him to lose his memory, but the next words out of his mouth brought me back to reality. "Did the doc fill you in?" "My lower half, it's not going to move anymore. This hospital life, it's like being in hell. I hate the idea of having a stranger take care of my personal needs. I prefer you 100 times over. I just want to be discharged and go home." John's pride was evident. He couldn't stand being cared for by the nurses, even though the nurses were just doing their job for him. I thought it incredibly ignorant to speak like that, and John continued with his selfish remarks. I know I've become like this, but being with you makes me want to keep on living. So let's continue to support each other as husband and wife, okay? Continue to support each other? If my memory serves me right, we've never supported each other as a couple, not even once. Sean always left the household to me and went out to play. I turned a blind eye because he was tired from work, but if he's been cheating, that's a whole different story. Cheating is outright betrayal. The more I talk to John, the angrier I get. I'm overwhelmed by the feeling that I must not forgive this man, and my instincts scream to bring him down completely so he can never be so presumptuous again. Unaware of this, John suggests, maybe we should just move, or living with my parents might not be a bad idea, as if he hasn't woken from his dream. That's why I decided to make him face reality first. Sorry, but I have no intention whatsoever of taking care of you. At my words, John's eyes widen in shock. Then, with a trembling voice full of disbelief, he scrambles for words. Don't make such a cruel joke, please. I genuinely believe that you would accept me, help me out. But to hear such a joke, it really hurts. It's not a joke at all. I'm serious. Let's get a divorce. I can't stand the thought of continuing as your wife after the way you behaved, not to mention the cheating, and I certainly won't be taking care of you. When I make myself clear, John seems to finally understand how I feel, and he starts to babble in panic. But that's just too much, isn't it? As you can see, I've become paralyzed from the waist down. I can't live on my own. I need you. Please don't abandon me. You're all I have. Tears well up in John's eyes. He must be serious about trying to hold on to me. Never before has John tried to face me this honestly. Even when I tried to confront the issues, he would brush me off, saying it's too troublesome, and wouldn't even engage in a proper discussion, which is essential for a married couple. But now he's suddenly saying he wants to talk, seemingly in an attempt to protect himself. But it's not for my sake or because he wants us to work as a couple. It's just John being selfish, wanting me to remain as his maid to make his life easier going forward. I have no obligation to indulge such selfishness, and there's nothing in it for me. Would the old me who loved John with all her heart, no matter how problematic his behavior, have listened to his words and agonized over them? Maybe. If I accept John now, even if we can't support each other, we might have a different kind of marriage, a bit closer to what it should be. Sean has a high self-esteem and can't bear to rely on others, so even in this state, he'd probably find work and try to support himself. If there's a chance to start over, it would be now. Such an opportunity won't come again. If I abandon John here, that's the end of our relationship. We'll never go back to being a couple, and he'll lose his support in me, likely facing hardship. If I leave John now, I might be dooming him to a life of wandering, lost, and alone. It's a significant decision as a person and as John's wife. But I've already decided not to go back because the love has cooled and the trust in John is gone. Sure, if I accept him now, we might talk seriously for a while and lead a life more like a married couple, but I've grown tired from being treated like John's servant for so long. I can't bear the thought of striving for his sake any longer. Please think it over. Without you, I really can't do anything. Look at me, I can't walk or even stand. Don't just leave a guy like this alone. John's tone is earnest. He knows if he loses me now, he's finished. It was clear to me that he was desperate to keep me tied to him here, to not let me go. But still, I'm sorry, I just can't continue with you anymore, so please give up. With that, I stand up to leave. Sean looks at me and pleads, "Wait, let's talk," but I leave the hospital room without listening to his cries. Soon after, my divorce from John was finalized. A mutual acquaintance of John and me just happened to know about John's affair, and when they heard about John's accident, they testified in court, which swung things even more in my favor. John begged me not to leave him, crying until the end, but my disgust for him had grown so strong that I couldn't stand the sight of him and didn't take any of his words to heart. I received a fair amount in alimony, though it wasn't a fortune. Unfortunately, John had to leave his job due to the accident. Now he's working at a company that hires people with disabilities, doing simpler tasks. Consequently, his salary has decreased. He's finding it tough to cover expenses with the alimony payments and can't afford a comfortable life. John's parents cut ties with him when they found out about the affair, showing no concern for his condition. They expect him to fend for himself from now on. As for me, I'm leading a fairly content life. Since divorcing John, my brother and his wife, concerned about my newfound single status, often bring over Emily, which keeps me from feeling lonely. Auntie, let's play. Let's play. Emily's words were a wake-up call for me. That's why I'm so thankful to her. As an aunt, I aim to continue being a dependable presence for her.